Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Read Along Book Club of Absolution by Jeff Vandermeer. This is probably going to be a long video. There's a lot of chapters to cover. I think it's something like 75 pages. So hang in there. Hang in with me. Don't worry. There will be chapter selections down below if you get bored, or you can always just click off the video too. But I hope you don't. I hope you don't. I hope you hang out with me till the end, because there's a lot of stuff that's going on in this group of chapters. It's I feel like Vandermeer's taken a very different approach with Absolution compared to the Southern Reefs trilogy. Now, granted, there was a lot of weirdness in the Southern Reefs trilogy, but I feel like the weird in this book is on a completely different level. I know it's been 10 years since he wrote the original trilogy, so he's a different person now. He's written other books. He's in a different mindset. Granted, it does still feel... It feels Area X, right? It feels Southern Reach, but there's just this extra layer of oddness in it. But anyway, let me know what you're thinking about it. Let me know if you had a particular favorite part in this sequence. But let's just get into it, shall we? So we're going to start with chapter 14. Every sorrow, the green light and the cleft between the two mountains. But this time an army of house centipedes poured into the gap in endless legions against a barren, silent landscape. Old Jim, he's losing it because the world was filled with forgotten places that had been something else once, had contained something else once, renamed by whatever you did there now. And a fading image of a burning candle, an empty vessel. You'll know that he often is going. This was a phrase, or I think it was a question. Actually, he was asking himself: is he the candle? Is he the flame? Is he the empty vessel? And this is just a recurring theme, and it's starting to make more sense, right? And you'll notice here that an empty vessel is on its own line, right? It's not part of the previous sentence, even though it could have been. It could have been grammatically, but he decided to add that as a punctuated moment. So let that sink in. I should go back to this previous line too, because I really enjoyed it. The world was filled with forgotten places that had been something else once, had contained something else once, renamed by whatever you did there now. So it's always fascinated me when you go places like this, and you know that wherever you are, like wherever I'm sitting right now in this moment, wherever you are out there, sitting or standing, listening, maybe driving a car, who knows how you're listening to this or watching this, but wherever you are was something else at one point. And I know it sounds stupid to think about. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's I don't know. It's a great thing to ponder, because it gives us an idea or a sensation of how insignificant we are, right? It's the old cosmic horror vibe, where in a way, even though I guess is it cosmic horror? I guess it is to a degree, but how we're such a very small blip in the scheme of things, right? And many of us out there, many of you out there, obviously, most of you out there probably who are watching these videos, I'll never meet, I'll never know. And it's something weird to think that you guys are off doing your own thing, having your own lives, making your own impact, but then also where you were was something else. Somebody else was there at one point. I know I'm getting weird. I'm getting philosophical, but lines like these really give me pause. They make me think. And that's, again, that's why I love Vandermeer's writing. I love any kind of writing that does that. But I'll shut up and we'll continue. The alligator tracker tracked nothing. The further examination of old Decomp's contents proceeded laborious through third parties, low-level players on Failure Island, brought over for perhaps useless task. The weather had turned colder, merged into fall, but he's still not enough sleep. He's trying to sleep, but it's never enough. The surprise, it was the phone for tourists that is ringing right now. It's not the central bat phone. Old Jim here, he said into the receiver. A sense of heavy breathing at some remove made him fight the reflex to hang up. Who is it? Well, we know who it is. This is very reminiscent to the voice that would also known as Lowry, who would call control with this voice disguising kind of thing. You threatened me if I didn't call, but I have called, and you never answer. Not one time. Why would you do that to me? I've done nothing wrong. You should just leave me alone. Granted, in a very weird sounding way, right? The person was using some sort of distortion device. This person sounded lyrical almost, bird-like, but a big aggressive bird, not a songbird. Does it work both ways? Old Jim asked. The voice distortion. What do I sound like to you? You sound like an old man to me. It's the mutter. Of course it's the mutter. Why disguise your voice? I know what your voice sounds like from the tapes. You can't trust voices to just be voices. A sound leaves a trace, like a parasite. In order to exist, sound needs a host. Yeah, she's gone batshit crazy, and I think that's the conclusion he comes to, that really no one survived Deadtown, the event, the Deadtown disaster. What can you tell me about the expedition that wasn't in your journal? I have no value to you. That's what I'm trying to tell you. You can just forget about me. Tell me more about the rabbits, the alligators then, even if it was in your journal. Hesitation, then. The rabbits made the alligator worse. No one wanted to say it because it sounded crazy, but the more rabbits the alligator ate, the more atypical it behaved. A terrible thought occurred to old Jim. Did members of the expedition eat those rabbits too? Ooh, eerie. But no, at least it appears to be the case. It ate the cameras, and that was the problem. That's what changed her. The tyrant, I think. What about the stranger? He talked to you in the bar once. A man whispered in your ear. Man-boy Slim might have called him the Rogue. How do you know that? How do you know he talked to me? But he whispered, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. It should be different already, but it isn't. So I'm doing my best. What does it mean? What does it all mean? Did you see the stranger that night? Did you ever see the stranger after that? Silence for too long, because she must have seen him, right? He was shucking cameras like oysters. We saw him the next morning with the tyrant shucking cameras like oysters. We'd gotten lost and we saw him through the binoculars across the lagoon. And he was melting down cameras like in a bucket, like shucking oysters, except keeping the shells, harvesting them. And he tossed the rest of the tyrant who gobbled them up right there by his side like a fucking pet. How did he do this? You won't believe me. Try me. He stood over them. He breathed on them. And he what? He drooled on them. You mean like he spat on them? Saliva? Just what I said. And the rabbit cameras, you viewed some of the video footage. If you saw it, you would have run as far away from that place as you could. There came a formless, primal scream from the phone, and old Jim held it away from his ear as the mutter began shouting. You see a place like the coast, you see it, but it's different. Impossible things live there, and the lighthouse is a glowing green spear. And out at sea, you can see the ship split in half, and if you walk too far, you reach a point you can't go any farther, and you're trapped while all the impossible things are hunting for you, all the monstrous things you thought were only in your dreams. She's gone. Absolutely crazy, but that's no surprise to anybody reading this book. But there came no click of the phone. Instead, old Jim heard a loud crack like a handgun firing, a recording. That was good acting, he said finally. Maybe to no one. But I know you're still on the line. The gunshot had been a recording. Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. Leave me the fuck alone or I'll kill you. I'll come back there and I'll kill you all. And old Jim placed the receiver back on the phone. It was the kindest thing he could do for the mutter. Maybe no one had really survived the expedition except the medic. Indeed, that's what I said. So the poor mutter, gone crazy. Where is she? How does she have this device? Is she at Central? It doesn't seem like it unless Jack is messing with old Jim, which by the end of the sequence of chapters, it appears that Jack is indeed messing with old Jim. And we are definitely back to the old tactics of Central where they put people in roles and situations and just mess with them. It's almost like they're not an operative. They're like a tool for observation, for experimentation. I don't know, but it's weird. But old Jim tried to go back to work, but he couldn't. The sense of being caught in a trap or a maze, the suffocation of that. He escaped to the porch instead, and there's Gloria arriving on a bike. Mom's cookies, no raisins, just oatmeal and chocolate chip. Thanks for taking the hook out of my foot. You should read the note. It's from my mom. She likes you. And the note read, thanks for taking care of my daughter. Maybe I can buy you a drink someday. As thanks. Trudy Jenkins. And then he asks her if she writes letters too. And she says, no, mostly I draw things I see. Starfish, lighthouses, pretty rocks. What about that man you push into the sea? Will he get a letter? No, he will not get a letter. What about a postcard? Is that okay? So it's less significant than a letter, and he agrees. Is there something wrong with you? She asked. Yes, he said. Now you should go. Later, though, an itch came back, and old Jim went inside and pulled the rug out. The safe, that is what he's finding. He pulled the mutter's journal out, except all the pages had been slashed to pieces with something like an X-Acto knife, and then patiently pushed between the covers to fit in a plastic container. What is going on? Someone had come into his house to do this. Someone had known the combination to the safe. Then he went to his office for the nightly ritual of turning on the alligator tracker. And what happens? Holy crap. Then the dot blinked red. It blinked red. It was. In the middle of Dead Town, the dot shifted to a different location as if it's hopping. Then it began to move rapidly toward his location at speed. He went out into the back deck and he tossed that thing out into the darkness because he's getting freaked out. Is it real? Is it not? If the alligator, the tyrant, is part of the rogue, maybe they exist on some plane of existence, different plane of existence entirely. Who knows what the hell's going on? But anyway, that brings us to chapter 015, The Monkey's Paw. There came on rushing the Friday night at the Monkey's Elbow gig, like a great beast coming for old Jim. Ooh, interesting, right? Not a Leviathan, not a behemoth, but a beast. When a new Commander Thistle would join the band for one night only, he needed time to think, to connect the dots, and he spent whole days drawing and redrawing diagrams that showed the Mutter, the Medic, Manboy Slim, 3M for short, in relation to the rogue. And Trudy, Gloria's mom, with a wave, she shows up, and less of that feeling noticing Manboy Slim walk in. So he is here as well. But soon enough, the band is taking the stage, and every volunteer lead singer had to write a new song that would be recorded only for a limited edition small batch pressing. So Vandermeer's created a very interesting, I don't want to call it a side plot, but a weird world building little setup with his band and how Commander Thistle is the new singer that they bring, and they have to bring a song. So I don't know, it's kind of weird. I mean, some of this definitely comes to light a little bit toward the end, but what does it mean other than that? I don't know. But Commander Thistle came up after the regular members of Monkey's Elbow, a bulky man dressed in a strange hat, we know what kind of hat, and a long trench coat that, from behind the bar, Jim paid only half a mind to as the drink orders came in. So he's dressed like kind of like a pirate, I guess, right? The man's voice fit his image, a rusty and slow roasted with a hint of barbed wire, rasp but no twang. I love that description. It's beautiful. And he begins to sing this song. The shining out became less divided as it repeated until the commas had been obliterated, and it could as easily have been outshining, a moment of recognition in the words he didn't understand for the song or the singer. Old Jim, he's losing it. And then Cass shows up. She walks into the bar, and she asks old Jim a question, but he couldn't hear it over the music. But maybe for one night, they could just both be civilians. So he's hoping that they could be normal for once, right? They could just get rid of the weirdness, be perhaps father and daughter, although it's not really, though, which I'm a bit confused in this chapter. I know it's called The False Daughter. I know he believes that Cass is not his daughter, but I thought it was just kind of him in denial. But it appears that it's really not his daughter. I don't know. Let me know. Did I miss something? We'll get there. Oh, weary night. Oh, ceaseless journey. For how long could a band play without pause when their lead singer was made of solid stone? Candle, flame, or vessel. There it is again. He couldn't be sure he was hearing the lyrics right, or maybe there was no right way, because so different. Oh, to be the burning light, sinking beneath the waves. Oh, to escape this nameless plight and dive into the whirling grave. The way the black of Commander Thistle's mask felt like stark night staring back at him when he woke distressed. The mask captured the beginning or very end of the scream. A sense of violence or disturbance lurked beneath the impassive gaze. I can't remember if they described what the mask looked like in the previous passage, because I know it doesn't later, because I just finished the chapter. The key was back in his pocket, but he did not remember opening the safe. Manboy Slim, he comes up to the bar. You know what I learned today? Well, old Jim, what I learned today is that what appear to be the stubby legs on a caterpillar are actually proto-legs. They're completely fake. The real legs are on its face, if you can believe that. Can you believe that? So anyway, these fake legs still help the caterpillar move around, real fake legs. Imagine that. Can you imagine that, old Slim? Old Slim, he's a little drunk, but there's some subtext in these lines, right? He's telling him, can you imagine if something is not what it seems? Because what if other things were like these caterpillars indeed? Yeah, well, it means something philosophically, Like, would you recognize a caterpillar as a caterpillar without its fake legs? And what if the caterpillar's disguise is something else to begin with? And if you carefully pulled off the fake legs, would it walk on its face? He's drunk, but he's speaking wisdom in the context of this novel. I have to take a leak, but don't you go anywhere. So many tales to tell you, so many tales to tell on you. Interesting turn of phrase there. Outside was cool and dark, the street lamp in front of having gone out, and the county in no rush to come around to replace it. He began to feel at peace when a boy and a girl stepped into the neon blue green. This is so weird because I did not know this was Henry and Suzanne at first. He calls them vampires. I also didn't realize Henry had an accent. Maybe it's something I forgot. Did I? Let me know in the comments if you remember in Acceptance if we noted that he had an accent, or if this is another just weird hallucination that's going on. But her gaze was feral, her teeth sharpened by shadow, right? Because vampiric. Hello, Jim, the man said. He had small eyes and an oval face, was stout, but no muscle behind it. Do I know you? Old Jim asked. I think you do. In fact, I think you know all about us. You're the Knight Commander, after all, pulling the secret string of Valhalla. It gets weirder, man. The secret strings of Valhalla, huh? Sounds important. And I know all about you, too. Your insomnia, your sleepwalking, all your pacing back and forth in your office. I understand it's a lot of responsibility running our organization. Must wear on you, Knight Commander. Got a point to this? We want to know who your boss is, Knight Commander. You run tricky Cass, and maybe someone runs tricky you. And we want to know where the rest of the resources are. The money we need to do our critical research. Where is it? Why withhold it now? Are you one of those Ouija hacks that roam the coast? If so, you're the head hick, Knight Commander. If a bird flies long enough inside a house, is it still a bird? Henry looked confused, struggled to respond. Do you exhibit glib and superficial charm? Is there something wrong with you, Knight Commander? Something breaking down, perhaps? Here's another one, old Jim said. A belt buckle and a brick are traveling in opposite directions away from each other. The brick at the speed of a snail on a bad day, and the belt buckle at the speed of a waistline expanding at the rate of 3 inches per month. Which one will reach you first if you stand at the exact opposite end of the universe, the snail or the waistline? Henry smiled, revealing the affectation of sharpened incisors. So which is it? Do you like how you were greeted at the silo? Henry asked. A group of fishermen came sprawling out from the bar, just as this is a very common scene in films where there's a tense moment and then bystanders just kind of show up. And Henry, he kept a cocked finger like a gun, right at Jim. As if they really were vampires, they leave. Except soon after, old Jim heard the cough of a car engine starting, and he figured they decided not to fly away. I love that encounter. It's different than how I remember. Well, recently, right? How we experienced Henry and Suzanne, and yeah, like I said, I don't know. Vandermeer's just going full crazy in this whole thing. But old Jim had no stomach for going back to the bar after that. He ducked into his office, and from there, from the storeroom and out back in search of the little bridge. Henry had unnerved him. But when he stepped onto the bridge, he heard a sound in the water, as of an animal moving away from the marsh. Some beast large and ponderous, the tyrant. A figure rose at the other end of the bridge, and... Man, Boy Slim, is that you? Old Jim asked. But the figure said nothing. It wasn't Man Boy Slim, but he knew it was. Whispering in old Jim, whispering and whispering like a floating flame over the mud flats. The rogue. He tried to drop to one knee, pull the pea shooter. The rogue's words were slamming into him now, slamming into him and drawing him close, reeling him in and drawing him out. But old Jim's mouth was opening wider and wider, still to vomit words, to erupt words toward the rogue, words and patterns he had never learned, words meant to harm, and he heard the rogue shriek as if he had been dealt a physical blow. And even as old Jim was falling down a deep well, a flight of stairs, into a crevice beneath the sea with no oxygen to breathe, no pulse, no heartbeat, nothing but dark sky above, until his body felt like a vast, blackened meadow, with the rain coming down. Ah, Cass. Ah, Genevieve. What had he done? What was he still doing? And then there was nothing but darkness. There's a lot of dips to darkness in these sections of chapters. What the hell is going on, man? The rogue has done something to old Jim, as he recognizes a little bit later, which brings us to the new section of The False Daughter, titled Dissolution. This is chapter 016, Water Lives Here. And old Jim stared out from the banks of a sandy, slow river held in deep shadow by ancient trees. He was a vessel. There it is, right? A vessel with a guttering candle left on the bank, and he could not move. He hears the sounds of distant gunfire. He woke in an unfamiliar bed, a lounge chair opposite with brigade files on the seat. He was in the water, becoming the deep water, becoming ... Woke again to the sensation of a centipede curled around his brain, under his skull, fast fading. He's succumbing to the madness of the rogue, pretty much the same kind of madness or control or whatever it might be that befell the biologist on the Dead Town expedition. Stay still. Stop trying to move, Cass said. And Cass had pulled up a stool beside him, her hair short and blonde, just like he'd thought. You're lucid? You know you're in the bedroom of my apartment? He nodded. So what happened? A lot. How long? He tried to keep the panic out of his voice. 3 days. I brought you here so I could keep an eye on you. Someone ambushed you at that little bridge. I shot at them as they tried to get away. Pretty sure they took one in the chest. Someone torched old Decomp, and the psychics on Failure Island found an alligator harness using your bobber. And a couple of hours later, Cass helped him downstairs and dumped him in the chair at the kitchen table. What's in the terrarium? 2 clawed frogs that look like plastic and don't move much, Cass said. I call them Jack and Jackie. Ha ha ha. I love that. How'd you know to look for me at the bridge? I noticed as soon as you went into the office. I think I told you not to use that back door for breaks, and I've been keeping an eye on you. Emotion so strong it surprised him, right? He's feeling this connection because daughter or not daughter? False daughter? Thank you, he says. Jim, she's calling him Jim. I wouldn't have been caught dead on that bridge after dark, fully exposed. A sniper could have ended you, and there would have been nothing I could do. You know that, right? While you eat breakfast, let me tell you about what happened on the bridge. Cass had found him by the screams that cut off suddenly. At the entrance of the bridge, on his side, trying to get on all fours, bruised and weeping, he was striking out blind with his knife. At the far end of the bridge, Cass saw a figure moving forward and put 2 rounds into the general direction of his chest. No, it definitely wasn't Henry. No, not anyone she'd recognize like Man-Boy Slim. Blood spatter on the boards led to the grass, enough blood to believe she did some damage. There were no fingerprints, no shoe prints, nothing but the blood. And Cass recalled that he had kept talking about a candle and a flame, right? Some other weird shit. A winter journey, there we go. So Cass had gathered him up and gotten him into the bar office, put him on the cot they kept in the back there for naps, and gotten Trudy to examine him. Cass had alluded to a history of seizures as cover, because she's got a cover for old Jim. By midnight, old Jim was deep in sleep, and she'd gotten word that old Decomp had gone up in flames. Oh, and here, one thing from old Decomp survived. Must have been hiding among the sample trays. She placed a photograph on the table, the remains of a rabbit camera from 20 years ago. Send it to Central as soon as you can, old Jim said, which brings us to chapter 017, Nothing Tracks. Old Jim got dressed. He asked for any new reports he'd missed to be brought back along when they went out. He'd survived the rogue, and now it was time to plunge ahead, even if that meant transport via Cass's crappy hatchback with its lurching 5-speed. This is when we find out she's into punk music. They drove to the coast amid an impossible yearning on old Jim's part. They reached a little strip of beach where the harness had been found. Old Jim found the trees here strange, either dead snags like ragged spikes sticking out knee-deep from the salt water, or the sand pines that grew gnarled but tall, with few lower branches but a sudden opening up to the verdant green fan shape at the top. What is that? He asked, pointing to the structure, in quotes, in front of them. A half circle of stone in the shallows just offshore, cradling the mud flats that had formed in front of it. A place that was different once, Cass said, and will be again. That kind of alludes back to or connects back to the quote that fascinated me, that got me all philosophical, I guess in a stupid way, but very reminiscent of it. It was a kind of observation point, had been buried in the sand and reduced to a ruin. How close were they? The psychics, tell me about it. Beecham's Point, they said. They saw it in the thoughts, as they put it. Whose thoughts? I don't know. The ones who saw it are still in the sub at the bottom of the sea conducting other research. Just that, and I quote, a mind had revealed itself and we could read it amid the static. I think the rogue lets them see what the rogue wants them to see, or did. What about all those tracks? Yeah, there's been a lot of traffic on this beach, popular with animals for sure. And Casses, though, were the only human prints among all the animals. How did you know this about the animal tracks? I learned it growing up in a place like this. Different latitude and longitude, but similar. I had a dad who took me fishing and hiking. You didn't have that? No. That long, wide track, like something sliding through. A very, very large alligator, I'd guess. The tyrant. The rogue didn't burn down old Decom, old Jim said. The rogue wouldn't have left the camera. The rogue would have taken the camera. And what would it accomplish anyway? I've been thinking about how we're floundering. While you slept, I got the blood sample analysis back. The one from the bridge. Not human, alligator blood. I'd made up a story about wildlife studies relevant to foreign entities. I shot him twice in the chest. There was no gator, as far as I can tell, despite there being no body. The rogue is in bad shape right now. We have to go to Deadtown, he said. Now. Why? Because everything started there. Because in my office, the alligator tracker had blinked red there. Dun dun dun. So now they are heading off to Deadtown, which is I love this chapter. This is a cool scene where they're venturing back into the world that old Jim had only read about. But yes, let's talk about chapter 018, the dead. Nothing like the old days. Those old days he'd never known on this forgotten coast. Now there was a halfway reliable route you could take to Deadtown. On the way, he found out Cass liked to listen to punk music. Cass also liked to race her hatchback down dirt roads. Cass has some interesting hobbies, right? No country stations? Old Jim asked. You like country? No, she laughed. Punk isn't for you, is that what you're saying? I don't even know what this is. Exactly. It's a lot of sound. Every once in a long while, a man with a shotgun and hunting dog who stared at them with a stoic interest as they're driving along their way. Old Jim noticed that Cass's mood dipped when she had to slow to a crawl, a creep, at the turnoff onto a road lined by a barbed wire fence and overgrown with long grass, ending at a locked gate flanked by a bog and a thicket of wax myrtles. You ready? She asked, opening the car door. Yeah, sure, he said. Born ready. And she winced at that cliche. I wasn't hoping. I knew Vandermeer would make a joke at that line. She produced a machete from the trunk. What is going on? She's getting hardcore with this machete. But they approached from the north, down the east side of Deadtown. From the files, old Jim believed no one from Central had been there for more than a decade, and no one else had either. From the evidence of the curled over remains of barbed wire fence at the number of monstrous blackberry patches Cass cut through. I don't know about you guys, but if I lived somewhere near somewhere like this, I would totally be going out there. Unless it was like rumored to be dangerous, which I guess in this world it is, but I don't know, if you're not superstitious, right? You might go check it out. But the meadow, when they reached it, was a riot of purples, yellows, oranges, white. It's so dreamlike, so surreal, so overly saturated, so many colors and hues. So it became a kind of impressionist painting. I love that visual. But is it really like this, or is it just old Jim's mind as it kind of has been affected by the rogue? It hurt to look at without squinting. They walked into Deadtown, onto the main street. The eroded asphalt of the road cracked by vines and tree roots, overpowered by grasses that exploited every fissure. City Hall anchored to the street, but unlike the surrounding buildings, it had all four walls and a roof. Interesting, it's put together. Cass insisted on making him wait at the bottom, machete left propped against the stairs, while she took the steps two at a time and checked out the roof, the third floor, the second, and back to the first. I don't think anyone's here or has been here for a while, she said. But the second floor, which had been the tourist center, looked more promising from the doorway. Could you hunker down as low as you can get and look for a parallel to the floor? He asked Cass. I see it, she said. What do you see? It's like a tunnel, fairly wide, higher than your knee, leading to the chair, like something swept through from the doorway and crawled toward the chair. Flakes of dried mud, traces of dead moss, and kind of an old smell, swampy. An animal's trail. Very similar to the crazy animal trail, right, we saw on the beach. The dot blinking red in the middle of Dead Town, and his heartbeat blinking faster now. I love that. Yeah, up there on the second floor, somehow. The trail ended at the booth alcove and the large leather swivel chair, which was covered in streamers and loops of material like gauze or shower curtain. An enormous rug lay in the left of the chair, cleared of debris. The thick discoloration across the rug, impressed on that surface over time, did suggest the shape of an alligator. The rogue had somehow trained an alligator, probably the tyrant, to serve him. To what? Perform a few tricks? Guard him like a dog? I don't like the thought of that, she said. The rogue with a pet alligator holding court in Dead Town. At the edge of the rug, in a weird shadow cast by the chair, old Jim spied something the size and shape of a pork chop. Is that a bone? And under the flashlight's glow, old Jim could see that a peculiar residue, like golden pine dust, covered the chair back. This is getting very fantastical, is it not? Maybe you really did hurt him, old Jim said. Maybe you did, and that's why this place seems abandoned. They see some graffiti written there that reads, "No change, but too early. Wrong season." What does that mean? The more words he couldn't read, written small, unobtrusive. Kind of symbol drawn there too, unfamiliar to him, with a stylized lighthouse in green. We know about lighthouses, don't we? And follow every shining glimmer down the winding river bend. The air will hit the trees like a whistle or a ring of thunder. That wasn't the winter journey he knew, though. The metal crumpled from the bomb underneath, and he lost control of the wheel and smashed against the mountain shoulder, the heat gushing into the compartment, and he couldn't breathe. No one could breathe, and the carrier twisted, toppled, careened off the road and down the slope toward the limitless blue above and below. That's such a great way to completely segue into a memory, right? This is like an old mission, old Jim had been on, and it was cool how him seeing this and reading these words and thinking of these song lyrics really took him back. But to the side of the words on the wall, the same person had scrawled a person's name, his true name, which is what? I don't think we even know. Yeah, we don't know. Trapped into blackness, into nothing, trying to get out as the flames rush through. So he's trapped again in this memory. Reality is blurring. Things are getting crazier and crazier, aren't they? Which brings us to chapter 019, Failure to Deal. A sound like a song, like music and yet not. It had a delicate quality, a questing, searching pulse, with a depth in the echoes and a comforting familiarity. It nested in old Jim's head, a sound that could never have emanated from a human throat, and yet, what non-human could make music that felt like far distant home? The beauty of it overwhelmed him as he peered down a tunnel in the reeds toward the water. I'll singe every falling wave, green field, swallowtail, the sun up from the depths as I follow a flaming trail. It's so great to see how Vandermeer, he started with Cass's poetry, right? And then it turned into him learning these songs and the piano. And then it turned into the lyrics that were by the Commander Thistle. Is it Commander Thistle? Am I getting it wrong? I don't remember. We'll find out. It's just cool how there's like this musicality to it. There's we know there's a power in words and phrases, particularly with hypnosis, which we'll get into very shortly here. And I just love the wordplay, right? It's music, it's poetry, it's hypnotic suggestion. It's all crazy, man. You'll find me in the scrub, across riverbeds and distant shores. You'll find me in bitter mist, hoverfly, bear witness. And there came a slap of the mighty tail against the water, a suggestion of a massive body submerging. The music ended abrupt, and the tyrant had vanished with it. Dread choked him as tears fell wet from his face. He came to himself in the dead meadow, a scream in his throat he couldn't contain or escape. The tyrant dragging her weight through the mud, over and through the biologist, the thrum and hum of her body like a memory of the song. He found a clear, muddy patch at the far end of the meadow, and he lay there on his back in a soft, comforting wallow. So he is just losing it, man. It's very similar. We were talking about this on my Discord server. It's very, I'm getting like a a control vibe a little bit, right? How he lost it, but also the other person on the server mentioned like also kind of a combination of Saul Evans as well, and just Saul Evans too was he, obviously once he touched the weird flower and got the splinter and then started changing, he was lost as well. And what really fascinates me most, I think, though, is how this place was just always weird before Area X ever happened. So I think when I first read the trilogy, there was mentions of, Failure Island and the psychics, and there's some weird stuff going on out here. Potentially it's got some like supernatural undertones, but for the most part, it just seemed like that was background. That was just like hypotheses, and but now we're getting a real sense of that. You can tell that Vandermeer is really leaning into that aspect, that just whatever it is about this place is special. Maybe not in a good way, but in some kind of way, and it appears to be that's what drew whatever caused Area X here, perhaps, or is it? Is it these parallel universes? So is it like part of Area X that's already happened, or because Area X eventually happens, there's remnants of past? I guess to be past timelines. It's all so weird. I wonder if we'll ever get a clear explanation, or if it's just going to be. Granted, I don't want everything to be explained, but I wonder if we're going to get a little bit more when this book's over. So anyway. We'll find out. He wondered if his daughter thought of him ever, and how and why, if it was still with any form of kindness or affection, if she had regrets, if she was happy now, if it sometimes tore into her the way it tore into him. Again, I love these asides that they're particularly happening when he's vulnerable, like now, where he's constantly not just thinking about his current state and the present of what he's going through and this mystery, I guess he's trying to solve. It all comes down to his daughter, and I know I've said this many times, but that's what I love about his books, is that he doesn't just focus on the ideas or the weird stuff or the horror. It's about the human connection, and that's really what ties everything together so well for me. And anyway, I'll stop gushing and continue. Until Cass found him there, a frantic look on her face as she stared down, and him without the energy or gumption to rise. So his daughter is the one helping him back to. It's like the roles have reversed. It's almost like, well, I shouldn't go this far, but the Road by Cormac McCarthy, where the father is saving the son, and then toward the end of the book, it's like the son is saving the father. Kind of similar, I guess. Cass slid down into the mud beside him, and she held him, and he cried into her arms, just like a child, right? Then she took his hand, his weathered, worn hand, and she told him a story about herself, about her past. It was sad and funny and tragic and complicated and terrifyingly personal, what she told him. And although it would become in time just the fading memory of something beautiful he had heard once, he kept it close and fiercely private and personal. Man, it's just fucking magical. I don't know how else to say it, but it's Vandermeer's writing for me often with passages like this particularly. It's almost like how music reminds you of something. You hear a song, and it takes you back to a place. That's what this does. Like it really hits home and makes me think of a moment where I shouldn't say I just felt this way, but like it gives you a sense of place and like a fleeting sense as well, though, that that these things, they're never going to be forever, and then this moment will be a memory. And I know I think I was watching a movie where they were talking about how what you remember isn't like the event that you're thinking you remember. It's like the memory of the memory of the memory, like repeated through time. I don't know if that's BS or if that's correct, but yeah, it's interesting how here I go again, being weirdly philosophical in probably a stupid way. So feel free to laugh at me in the comments. But, as time moves forward and we have these, as I'm sitting here recording this video, as you're sitting there or whatever you're doing, watching it or listening to it, I did this in the past. You're experiencing this moment that I'm creating right now in the future. And it's going to just be a moment. It's going to be a bunch of words lost to the YouTube pile of videos. I know this is a weird video. It's late here. I guess that's part of the reason why I'm talking about things like this. But anyway, when he had recovered himself enough to sit up, she said, "We don't have to go back there. I don't want to. We can just stay here for a while." The sun felt so distant, and he liked it that way. And Cass said, "Someone has damaged you badly and with intent over time. Who is it? Is it the rogue? Is it Jack? Is it Central? Is it a combination of all of those things? I don't know. Will we know? I don't know." Which brings us to chapter 020, chapter 20, Endless Night. All the warp and weft of aftermath. How it lived in his bones and his flesh, so that he felt inhabited by another and made into an empty vessel. An empty vessel, finally. We're lingering on that one. Another's body that had carried out the mission where he'd hit the roadside bomb. So this is feeling like he's viewing himself again as the vessel, meaning he's being used for a purpose just to carry something somewhere. I guess. I don't know. "You have to get over losing her," Cass had said on the drive back. "Just forget you had a daughter." So this is what I don't get. Like I said earlier, I thought that old Jim was just in denial that this was not his daughter. This couldn't be his daughter. It's a doppelganger, right? Created by Central. And then it felt like he's just crazy and she's just playing into it and allowing him to have that distance until they start to come closer and have a relationship. But then she says this, which makes me think she's not his daughter. I don't know, man. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, because maybe it's all illuminated once we get to the end. Because I know the third part of this book is, it appears to be unrelated mostly as far as the old Jim and Cass go, but I guess we never know. "Central made me write a letter to you as your daughter before I came here. I was supposed to give it to you the day we met, but I couldn't. It was too fucked up." So yeah, here we go. She just continues with this story that, man, I just don't know. I don't know. But when they reached his house, Cass waited to drive off until he was at the door. And as she left, he couldn't quite put a finger on what was wrong, because something was still wrong. The strange version of Winter's Journey, mutated, had entered his head, clashing with the original. "The air bleeds through cypress knees. Go forth, God. Body bent, my half prayer spilled through every wild glimmer." And old Jim checked for new faxes, found that Jack had relented about the exiles a bit, and graced him with Central's R&D about the cameras. What caught his attention right away was R&D's request to re-interview the exiles. Why? It was clear that R&D did not know about the Dead Town disaster. Who exactly at Central still knew about the Dead Town disaster? Clearly, it's going to be, this is not Jack. Old Jim is definitely a vessel, a tool of Central, which we shouldn't be surprised, right? That's how Central works. He had assumed Jack must still report some detail of his operations to higher-ups of Central. But what if that wasn't true? Just like Jackie's severance in Authority was kind of seemingly doing things outside of Lowry's force or supervision. Seems like Jack's doing the same things. Seems like she learned from Dad. But the alloy appears neobiological in its compression. The crude analogy, that of how the lichen adheres to a rock, and unable to survive without the rock, how moisture accumulates and is held on the rock, but it's also lichen. These kinds of bindings exemplified the relationship between materials and the object. So we're talking about the cameras, the materials, but I don't know, man. I don't know what's going on. When he moved the whiteboard, old Jim found a pile of burnt faxes, and they were all lyrics from Winter's Journey. What the heck, man? His hand swept across his pants pocket, and there came a kind of pearly click or slight clang. What is that? He frowned, didn't remember having put the strange key in his... we just got cut off. And he's down in the depths, rising. And by the river's bank, he looked out on the ravens that were not ravens, and the rocks of the green canopy resting there in the vessel, the candle, the flame, and the branches of the trees, etc., etc. He could hear a distant hum or music or chanting, and it came from both the water and the air. There came a voice he half recognized, half didn't. We know who it is. Get in the barrel and stay dead. Get in the barrel with the others. There you go. No use resisting now. Just get in there nice and snug. Cover yourself in the fluid and don't get any on me. I don't need it, only you. It should be quick. You'll all be in God's eyes soon, as it should be. What you did, it must have gone against God in some way. So just get in the barrel. Get in the barrel. Shouldn't be this long. I want to go home. Crazy front man of the Monkey's Paw. Was this a nightmare? It's not. It doesn't seem to be. I mean, it's like a living nightmare, I guess. But old Jim realized he was sitting in a chair with his arms around a huge sack like a mailbag, which sat in his lap like he was clasping a pillow or about to hand out gifts around the holidays. Such a funny way of describing that. And now he was fully awake and terrified. If he opened his eyes, this person moving around might notice, so he kept them shut. I love that image because he's, I don't know. That's even more frightening because he doesn't want this guy to know he's awake, but also he kind of wants to see it, but then he kind of doesn't. Get in there. Go down easy. Don't resist. The mailbag, in quotes, had the unmistakable slight shift and crunch of money in banded stacks. The voice rough with a cough behind it like a smoker. Yeah, like that. God loves you. God sees you. This is his path, his way. Go drown now, Happy. All's well. Why always this now, old Jim? The voice muttered. He dared to squint one eye open, and yes, he was holding on to a giant sack of cash. What? He was sitting in a chair with a key clasped, I can say it, in one hand, hugging a sack of money, listening to a psychopath talk about God while stuffing things into barrels of fluid. The man faced away from him, clad in a tricorn hat. I know, it's like a pirate or like a revolutionary guy, right? Bending over a large barrel that came up to his waist, in a thick hand gloved to the elbow, pushing at some ragdoll, some broken approximation of a person with one naked foot and a leg below the knee, lolling up at an unnatural angle over his side. On the floor to the left of the man, two more bodies half in, half out of an archway to a much larger room. He thought he recognized one or two of the bodies on the floor, a mid-level brute from Central who Jack had liked, a thwart as he liked to call them. The huge man, he's doing the stuffing. He stood up abruptly. The black mask was so thick and wide it appeared at first to be made of stone, wrapping around to hide even the man's ears. It is Commander Thistle from the bar. Commander Thistle shoving bodies into barrels like some kind of fucked up nightmare. Yep, fucked up nightmare. I told you, old Jim, to keep your eyes shut. Shut your eyes, peon serf. Shut your eyes. You serve them like marching automaton. You serve them like there's no risk in the reward. There's the quote, right? Like water lives there. Like you are on a long journey and have taken no rest. So close your eyes now. Close them. I'm leaving now, Commander Thistle, old Jim said, and you're going to let me. I see how it is. You're the resistance type. You're the meat thinks it isn't good enough for God's will. Well, I'll tell you, if I'm good enough for the mote in God's eyes someday, you're good enough for it now. Listen to me, old Jim said. I'm an agent of Central, and I'm going to walk out of here now. If you don't let me, you are going to die here. Do you hear me? Do you understand? Commander began to reach into one vast pocket of his outfit. Don't do it, old Jim shouted. Consolidation of authority? No. How about have your house in order? Risk equal to reward? Check under the seat for change? Old Jim only felt a fizzle and a tingle, though, because he was free of that, and the rogue had freed him. Commander Thistle put the piece of the paper away as if it had accomplished its purpose. Now get in the barrel, this barrel. Get in that barrel, old Jim. I don't know why I'm talking like a pirate, maybe because he kind of looks like one, which makes me wonder, is the rogue helping old Jim? And Central is trying to take advantage of old Jim. I think that's what's happening, right? Because he freed him of the hypnosis, at least it appears to be. But he noticed a small door behind Commander Thistle. I am the hand of God, Commander Thistle bellowed. I have been here before you and I'll be here after. Get in the barrel. Get in the barrel. You can get in the fucking barrel, old Jim said. Commander Thistle charged like a bull, smashed the man into the face with a money sack as he stumbled past, and they just start fighting. And old Jim could just feel the slickness of the blood in his hand on the knife hilt as he is just stabbing and stabbing and stabbing. I'm immortal, he rumbled. I will never die, pathetic remnant lost child. Commander Thistle ducked past him toward the door. He just bails, right? And old Jim stumbled through the door out into the night. He had emerged from the bio-waste facility, right, which is right next to his house. In fact, just 300 yards from his own house. Was he running the wrong direction, disoriented? What is going on? But maybe he meant to head towards old Jim's house. Uh-oh, why? What if he meant to destroy documents or get old Jim's Walter and send for help? Commander Thistle's back now visible, jerking and torquing ahead of him, with the effort running over uneven ground. "Stop!" he hissed. "Go to your God and beg mercy for your sins," the man said. "Who sent you? Who do you work for?" "God sent me." "No, God didn't fucking send you, you great fucking asshole." "You were supposed to be asleep," he said. "You weren't supposed to even wake up. You weren't supposed to ever wake up." "Jack said you might be difficult," Commander Thistle said. "Now you'll be difficult for Jack. He'll put you in a barrel himself." Jesus Christ. Yeah, I don't know why I forgot that. Definitely, Jack is using him. Stuffing bodies in barrels, God's work. Is Jack God? They're all brutes. They're all bad people. They needed God now. They got God now. Stop chasing me. I want to sit by a window by the sea. My God is near, but yours may be near. The giant man behind the mask toppled and sprawled, finally silent into the ever-present reed. So he is dead. Godspeed, Commander Thistle. Down to the fiery pits of hell, where old Jim hoped he would be stuffed into a barrel for all eternity. He limped back to the house to recover. As he reached for the living room light switch, he stopped dead. A figure sat on the couch in the dark in his house. "Hello, Jim," Jack said. "You're sitting in the dark in my living room. For how long?" "For a while." "What was so urgent it couldn't wait till morning?" "I'm being recalled to Central," she said, "to answer questions about what's been happening here. And not by Jack, by Central. I leave soon and I want you to know. This might take a week or it might be a month. You want to know if I have intel that can help you survive an inquest, is that it?" "Earlier today, while you and Cass chased ghosts or whatever it was you thought was worth doing, we lost 2 submersibles. The psychics on board set them on fire from inside when they reached the seabed because they were in contact through distance messaging with others on Failure Island. 3 more SNSB personnel are in comas, non-responsive. The building caught fire and we don't know why yet. For now, files and records are being evacuated and any Central personnel with them." "Where was Henry?" "We're looking into Henry, but it's unlikely," Jackie said. "He relied on the place to analyze what he'd found in the lighthouse." "We found something at Deadtown that might be an old sign of the rogue," he told her. "We took photos. We'll file a report." "You know, the next one they pull into Central will be you. Jack may have Central still thinking you're retired, but not for long. They might trapdoor this entire operation and disappear us all. Get us something we can use, Jim. A villain, a scapegoat, anything." "I'm working on it," old Jim said. And old Jim rose, opened the door, stood there waiting for her to leave. "I'll hold down the fort until you get back. Good luck at Central," he said. "What have you been doing tonight?" Jackie asked. "Just sleepwalking again," he said. He couldn't look at her. And he closed the door behind gently. Lines from Winter Journey, a pressure in his head. "Now I see a shifting signpost, shimmering beneath my gaze. But I must travel on, a ghost." For a long time after Jackie left, old Jim just sat there in the dark, pondering his next move, if he had one. Cass was gone again. Wow, so that brings us to the end. We are on the final section of The False Daughter, called Immersion. So let's see how far we need to read. Let me check my page count on my Kindle here. Why don't we read through Haunted Brass? So it's going to be the entirety of Immersion, which will bring us to the end of The False Daughter. And we will dive into the first and the last, the final part of this entire novel. And we'll get a little taste of what Lowry's like with all the F-bombs. So just as a reminder, read through chapter through Haunted Brass, which will take us to page 326. Let me know what you thought about this group. It was a very weird grouping of chapters. It's getting weirder and weirder and weirder the more we go on. And I feel like the first and the last is going to be quite possibly the weirdest. I know that is the most divisive part of the entire book, at least so I've heard. But I'm looking forward to it, man. I'm totally looking forward to it. I hope you are too. And again, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for hanging out, watching, reading, discussing all the things. And I will see you guys in the next video.